I didn't one day wake up and say, I believe these things, I'm a feminist. I already believed the things and then later learned that it's called feminism. My feminism is about understanding people and learning how to do that. I think that I am interested in people's difference and how we're all the same, but there's so much difference about us. And I think one of the big issues that patriarchy creates is the fact that it highlights difference as a negative or uses difference as a way to create structures and systems of oppression. So it uses our difference against each other. When I was a child, I was afraid of God. God was this idea of like an omnipresent form of control and the punisher. And that was just like what was taught to us in our church. And I think that I definitely at some point stopped believing in organized religion because I felt like at least the religious community that I grew up in was I did not see it as serving the community, but rather a way of controlling the community. Maybe when I was 14, 15, I stopped believing in God. I replaced my fear of God with fear of people and fear of men specifically, because I saw that it was actually men who were patriarchy were really controlling things, and it wasn't God. And God was just a tool of the patriarchy. Growing up in a religious family, I knew that like I did not feel like people were treated the same way. And that goes back to like this idea of like difference being used to separate people. So I come from a very poor family, and in the church, we were treated very differently than other families. Or just the idea of women being treated differently in the church that we grew up in. My mom kept my father's last name because she felt too pressured to change her last name, even though it was the name of her abuser. I was a feminist before I even knew what feminism was. Just like other things, like I knew what my sexual orientation was before I knew what the language was for that. SM relationships came out of not necessarily seeing too much of traditional relationships modeled for me. I think that there is this ingrained fear of like patriarchy and fear of men, which forces me to have very specific limitations with like how I let people have access to my body and to my time, and my need to very much be the person who's dictating how other people have access to me. And so I think that that's why I started participating in alternative types of sex. I have had many submissive identifying men, or what I would say men who claim to be submissive identifying, approach me and in proposing something that is more about them still wanting to have control over me and me role-playing for them as this fetishized dominant woman. And my experience of it is very different. I prefer that to be the actual dynamic versus it to be a role-played thing. I have learned so many things from other people, and that's because they can see the world differently than I do. And I rely on other people to help me understand themselves and understand their world. and that in turn, like, I gain from their difference and people gain from my difference. So it's important to create spaces and communities that are willing to, able and willing to be able to be open about their difference and to share it with each other. And I think that's a big part of my belief system in feminism,